Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to this final phase of the World Goodwill Seminar coming to you from New York. This phase of the seminar builds on the two meetings broadcast from Geneva and London earlier today. And we have had Geneva's presentations on a new culture, a new civilization, and another on the light of love, approached from a Sufi and African perspective. Then, from London, Jan Carling spoke on the challenge of true creativity and culture in an age of entertainment, while Max Haven spoke about his work on the radical imagination, based on the premise that our society, and therefore culture, is the product of our collective imagination, and therefore it's through the imagination that we must change it. And so we look forward now to further rich and varied presentations with guest speakers Jude Caravan, a cosmologist, planetary healer, futurist and author, Janice Garrett, a choreographer and dance educator, and John Fullerton, who has described himself as an unconventional economist and the architect of regenerative economics. So, how do all these seemingly disparate fields come together under the banner of a new global culture? And what do we even mean by culture? In a recent mailing, we discussed how the word culture has its metaphorical roots in the plant kingdom, from the Latin cultura, the tilling of land to prepare the earth for crops, and how the ancient Roman orator Cicero was the first to use the term as an agricultural metaphor to describe the cultivation of the soul, or cultura animi. So Cicero's works rank among the most influential in global culture, and the central idea being the cultivation of a philosophical soul as the highest possible ideal for human development. And this is surely the primary goal for a new culture, a sort of shifting away from materialism towards inclusive spiritual thought and expression. And this motivates all World Goodwill activities to make steady progress towards a culture of goodwill, goodwill being a dynamic and transformative energy. And it's this energy of goodwill that promotes human flourishing, as referred to in the seminar title. The concept of flourishing is more accurately related to joy than happiness and well-being. For joy is a quality of the soul rather than the personality. Joy is experienced through a life of virtue and reason that allows the energy of the soul free passage through all aspects of the personality life, conveying a sense of psychological levitation, a raising upwards. So it's a truly religious experience, and the reason why joy and the related word rejoice have such strong Christian associations. In the words of St. Paul, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say, rejoice. So joy should be the outstanding quality of the religious life, but as the initiative theology of joy and the good life observes. Notwithstanding the importance of joy to human well-being and the deep ancient religious foundations for understanding and cultivating joy, the very idea of joy has all but disappeared from modern theological reflection, is all but ignored by the social sciences, and is increasingly absent from lived experience. So the consequence is a flattening out, a graying of human life and communities, abundance of entertainment notwithstanding, and a sharp bloom of individual and communal dysfunction. And it's heartening, therefore, to see joy and flourishing emerging as features of the new and rapid growing field of the positive humanities, an area of research that brings together positive psychology and the arts and humanities. Furthermore, a research project associated with UNESCO's Future of Education initiative has proposed that flourishing is a central purpose of education. So, summarizing research from around the world, the recently published project report includes a section on education and human flourishing. Through all these initiatives and more, we can surely detect the dynamic beginnings of a new science of social evolution, to which the Alice Bailey writings refer, one that is based on the flowering of the spirit within each individual, and which, from an esoteric perspective, is vividly portrayed in the following ancient formula. Out of the lotus in the head springs the flower of bliss. Its earliest form is joy. And out of the lotus in the heart springs the flower of love. Its earliest indication, wisdom is. Out of the lotus in the throat emerges the flower of living forms. The earliest sign is understanding of the plan. It's difficult to think of a new culture without this reawakening of a new religious impulse, one that unites people everywhere and is open to the existence of a conscious and ordered plan or pattern behind outer events. This is the sense that evolution is being driven forward by a majestic purpose, and that the unfolding qualities of every unit of life, no matter how small and seemingly insignificant, are needed to fulfill it. And surely one of the most pressing needs of our time is the sense of working in a purposeful universe driven by goodwill. So it's a characteristic of a truly religious impulse, born from a sense of wonder about the world and the nature of existence. It seems to inject life with meaning that can revolutionize attitudes and strengthen the bridge to the subtle worlds of consciousness. So this sense of wonder, as expressed by the very young, is also a vital ingredient in education, and it should extend into their formative years, as well as in teenage life, driving minds and imaginations on a lifelong quest for meaning. And in contrast to the tendency to overemphasize intellectuality, a recent initiative entitled the Wonderful Education Project highlighted the importance of fostering the intimate connection between wonder, education, and various aspects of human flourishing, proposing that wonderful education could promote human flourishing in three ways: by stimulating learning, morality, and spirituality. And Anders Schinkel, in a paper entitled Wonder, Mystery, and Meaning, notes that inquisitive wonder is an active, searching attitude, a wondering about something that is resolved when the answer is found. Deep contemplative or existential wonder is not merely passive. And he goes on to say, the experience of wonder, especially of contemplative wonder, is one suggestive of a deeper or higher meaning. The pull one feels is that of a deeper meaning, not that of the comfort of everyday meaning. Wonder unsettles, exposes the limitations of existing frameworks of understanding. We don't return to them and cling to them, but we seek to go beyond them to more encompassing ones. It's this same sense of contemplative wonder that leads us to search for meaning, a progressively deeper understanding of the purpose of life and identification with it. And as Professor Schinkel recognizes, it can be an unsettling experience as it replaces established patterns of thought in which a certain sense of security and identity has been invested. But if we work creatively to cultivate a positive tension, we can break through the veils that enshroud the everyday world to reveal a realm of meaning. Interestingly, the word wonder is related to the German Wund or wound and suggests a breach in the membrane of awareness, a sudden opening in a man's system of established and expected meanings, a blow as if one was struck or stunned. To be wonderstruck is to be wounded by the sword of the strange event, to be stabbed awake by the striking. So it's probably fair to say then that the astronomical community, as well as many of the general public, have been stabbed awake by some of the beautiful and surprising images that have recently been transmitted to Earth by the James Webb Space Telescope. The universe is revealing even more structure and order than was commonly thought to exist, and the wonderful mystery of creation grows deeper than ever. The beautiful jewel-like galaxies hinting that there is intelligent direction behind cosmic evolution. So now I'm very much looking forward to listening to our first speaker. So let me hand you over to Michael to introduce her. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Jude Curvin, who is a cosmologist, planetary healer, futurist, and author. She was previously a senior international businesswoman. She is a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle and co-founder of Whole World View. She holds a PhD in archaeology and a master's degree from Oxford University, where she specialized in cosmology and quantum physics. This underpins, she integrates leading edge science and universal wisdom teachings into a holistic worldview. And this underpins her work, which aims to enable transformational and emergent resolutions to our collective planetary issues, raising awareness and empowering fundamental change and sustainable solutions to global problems. Her book, The Cosmic Hologram, won a Silver Nautilus Award in 2017, and her newest book, The Story of Gaia, releases, I believe, on November 1st, this coming Tuesday. That's correct. All right, great. Jude, it's so great to have you here. Please go ahead.
Michael, thank you. And Chris, thank you for that wonderful, wonderful bringing us into this field of wholeness. Marvelous. I'm going to share my screen if I might. Let's have a look. If somebody's going to help me on this. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to be showing some of the evidence, the leading edge scientific breakthroughs and discoveries that are really revealing what Chris was sharing with us, that unity isn't an aspiration, it is our existential reality. And of course, that's very different from what we've been told before, but it is true that this is now the case. I'm having a few problems on this. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to share today how an emergent unitive narrative can heal our past and transform our future. So from earliest times, as we're a social species. So as human beings, we've shared narratives, we've shared stories to try and understand the nature of the world and our place in it. And to do that, we've sought to embrace and reconcile both our inner and outer experiences, and as Chris said, to imbue them with meaning and purpose. And over time, of course, our narratives have evolved as our understanding of the nature of our universe and reality, and the deeper sense of that has also evolved. And Chris referred to the gorgeous images that we're now getting. We were from Hubble, we're now getting from the James Webb. But even beyond those, they're revealing actually that the appearance of our universe is not its fundamental reality. And now a number of scientists are coming forward to sort of stand alongside those of us who've been saying this for some time. And the evidence is now becoming more and more compelling that this is indeed the case. So our current narrative has been based on a secular science of solely materialistic reality and the appearance of separation. It's described essentially a universe that's bereft of meaning and purpose, where evolution is seen to be driven by random occurrences and mutations, and where immaterial mind and consciousness somehow and solely arise from material brains. And all of this now is being completely upturned. And scientific breakthroughs are revealing that although, it shares an understanding that has been helpful to some degree, of course, science continues to expand and deepen this perspective. And good scientists have always and will always, I hope, follow the evidence. But where the evidence is now leading us to across numerous fields of research and at all scales of existence is essentially a 180-degree turn in that perspective of materialism and separation. And instead, it's revealing a whole worldview of non-locally unified reality and a conscious and evolutionary universe, essentially a living universe that meaningfully and purposefully exists and evolves. And in fact, again, as Chris mentioned, what we're seeing is a universe that actually embodies an innate evolutionary impulse to evolve from simplicity to ever greater levels of complexity, diversity, a perception of individuated awareness, interdependence, and interbeing. And ultimately and vitally, it is a living, meaningful, and purposeful universe. It literally, as my friend Irvin Laszlo said, this evidence is re-enchanting the cosmos. And I'd love to hear what Janice has to say in terms of the arts of this, because one of the things that I know, having written the Cosmic Hologram 5 years ago and now the story of Gaia, is it's not so much facts that change people, it's emotions. And there's a wonderful quote about the role of the artist is to make the evolution irresistible. I'm sort of inviting, welcoming all artists everywhere to really feel into the existential reality of this new whole world view and imagine and bring forward and share the wonder and the joy and the gratitude for this whole new and unitive narrative. So what it's showing right from the very beginning is our universe began nearly 14 billion years ago, not in the applied chaos of a big bang. It wasn't big, it was minute. And it wasn't a bang. We now know that it was extremely fine-tuned and incredibly ordered, and the simplest it would ever be. And from that first moment of what I call an ongoing big breath, as space has expanded and time has flowed forwards, our universe, which we also are now finding to be innately informed with meaningful information, being its fundamental stuff, and from that emerging its appearance of energy, matter and space-time, nonetheless as a meaningfully informed and therefore conscious and living universe, and able as space expands and time flows to embody, to experience, to evolve ever greater levels of complexity and diversity. And essentially, though, to understand that as it does so, it exists and evolves as a unified entity. We believe, we've thought, we've bought into this paradigm of separation. We're now able to wake up, and of course, many of our beloved brothers and sisters, and especially Indigenous communities, have always understood this. We are inseparable. We and our planetary home and our entire universe are literally inseparable. So from that first moment of beginning, and we're seeing some of these glorious images with the James Webb, there was a very purposeful shepherding of the very earliest information expressed as energy matter, eventually into stars, and in their centers, in their beingness, there was a great alchemy, a wondrous alchemy from simplicity to complexity of all the chemical elements. And all of those elements came through generations of stars. And as the earlier stars, I sometimes describe the very early stars as a bit like rock stars. They lived hard and they died young, but my goodness me, the legacy they gave to us was wonderful, because as the end of their lives, they exploded, and all of those nutrients were joyfully spread throughout the space between them. So this is a James Webb image, actually, and you see the blue of space, but then you see this brown, amazing image of what's called an interstellar dust cloud. And in that interstellar dust cloud, and ones like it, we were born, our planetary system, and many, many others were born. And in those clouds, they are the wombs, they are the creches, they are the birthing places of solar systems and planetary homes. And we now know that the harbingers of biological life, all of the elements, ice, prebiotic molecules, were bathed by light, by ultraviolet light. These were the precursors to our entire planetary homes, Gaia's wonderful diversity, and ultimately ourselves. And we are part of, again, a wondrous trinity of systems. Our planet, Gaia, is the perfect distance from our star, Sol, a Goldilocks zone, to be able to be a water planet. And our moon, Luna, is the most wonderful size. We're almost a binary system. She keeps us stable. She nurtured us in the very early days of our planetary home to sort of ensure that in those conditions, we didn't become a frozen planet. We continue to be a water planet. The three, Sol, Luna, Gaia, form a family within a solar family of other planetary siblings. And Gaia herself, Gaia was the name given to the earth goddess, as some of you I'm sure will know, by the ancient Greeks, and they saw her as a living being. And James Lovelock, a pioneering scientist, realized many decades ago that she, as a planetary system, is completely interdependent. And now, although Jim would not probably have gone as far as to acknowledge the sentience, the innate sentience of Gaia, we're now realizing that our planetary home is a living being within a living universe. And she too has evolved over the last 4.5 billion years. Again, ever more from simplicity to complexity, the birth of biological children, eventually to ourselves, and all of her her atmosphere, her hydrosphere, her waters, her geological spheres, and of course her biosphere are completely interdependent and evolving as co-evolutionary dynamic partners. And the whole journey from simplicity to complexity has been one of collaboration on many different levels. And when those great leaps have happened, from single cell to multi-cell, to various extra complexities, to ecosystems, to human beings, to all that we have brought forward, all of which is part of the whole, that has been guided meaningfully, purposefully, as Chris said, guided, and in cooperative relationships. So perhaps we can talk more about this, because flourishing, our human future of potential flourishing, is calling for us to now literally embody Gaia's wisdom, to cooperate, to synergize, to link up and lift up, to realize that we are absolutely embedded in her web of life. And more than human beings, we are Gaians. And if we can grow up, as Ken Wilber said, and show up and clean up, because I know we'll talk about the healing that's needed, because our worldview of separation in many ways have driven a world of suffering, whereas a whole worldview of unified reality and unity and diversity naturally supports a world where peace is a natural outcome rather than conflict, where justice and fairness and inclusion are natural outcomes and behaviors of this whole worldview, and the unitive narrative that it enables to be articulated. So we're even more than stardust. You know, we've got a long history here. Hydrogen in our bodies is as old as the universe, and we embody the distributed and universally non-local intelligence. To just summarize at this point, our universe is a universe where mind and consciousness aren't something we have. They are literally what we and the whole world are. Our universe is a great and finite thought of an infinite and eternal cosmic mind. And I'm sharing this from a perspective of breakthroughs and evidence. This is what the evidence is showing us. This is what ancient wisdom teachings have always told us, what spiritual traditions and teachings and experiences have revealed to us. It exists to evolve as a literally informed and holographically manifested entity. Its appearance is a projection of consciousness. Everything in existence has meaning and purpose. We have, therefore, innate meaning and purpose as its microcosmic co-creators. So the question for us and today and ongoing is, what do we choose now? And this understanding, this new and unitive narrative, is also helping us, because of the evidence, to naturalize multidimensional mystical experiences, multidimensional engagement and communication, and archetypal realities and communications, and coherent group consciousness. It is showing us the empowerment of coming together in love. In love. As simple as that, when we begin to think and feel and speak from that place of inseparability, of unity in diversity, our group consciousness, because we are inseparable and we are vibrational beings, heightens the possibilities of what we can empower, inspire, and transform as Gaians to such new adventures and wonders. So in a sense, beyond conscious evolution is conscious revolution. And beyond the ego, me empowerment is our collective we and all empowerment. And beyond change, this offers us an opportunity for transformation. And I would suggest beyond well-being, this is a journey, a remembering of our whole being. and beyond unity in diversity and inclusion is our belonging. We don't need to ask permission. We belong as Gaians in a living and evolutionary universe. So I would suggest that this can help us heal our dismembered psyche. This can help us heal our dis-ease of separation. And there's much to do and to share and explore and come together to allow that, to embody that. But what this also does in terms of perhaps inviting us forward, it invites us to act local. And it matters because we relate, we belong, we involve, and it really calls us into the joy and the excitement of regeneration and sustaining. It invites us to link up and lift up together. There is the old saying, you know, act local, think global. Well, we've added a whole worldview, we've added another little nuance to this, which is act local, feel global, because we look after what we care about, we care for what we relate to, and we and Gaia are inseparable, we are Gaians. But then we've added a third, which is think cosmic, and why it matters. And it matters for these reasons, because we are co-evolutionary partners of our entire universe. We are its microcosmic co-creators. So we're being invited, it seems to me, with our conscious revolutionary opportunity to step up and step into that role that the whole universe is asking of us. So unity of narrative is articulated to invite that, you know, really welcome, invite that stepping forward and linking and lifting up, and to invite us into an embodied whole being that is founded in the hearing inwardly the wisdom of our hearts. And there's one key point here about the complementarity of feminine and masculine attributes, relatedness and perspectives, to really co-create the synergies within and between us. And its unity guides us, invites us into a wholeness of the inner and outer being and doing of our lives. And I'll finish by paraphrasing Teilhard de Chardin, who was a mentor of a beloved friend of mine, Jean Houston. And Teilhard said 100 and more years ago now, someday we shall harness the energies of love. And then for the second time in the history of the world, humanity will have discovered fire. I would suggest that someday is here and now. And this is what the unitive narrative speaks to. And as we wake up to the radical reality of a unitive narrative and the whole worldview evidence that underpins and frames it, and in turn, the unitive narrative can underpin and frame our service to conscious evolution and transformational change, we'd suggest that also as a species, we might discover, and perhaps for the first time, who we really and truly are and who we can evolve to become. So I'll stop sharing my screen now and come back to everyone.
Thank you so much, Jude. That was absolutely marvelous. It was as if this giant tapestry of this new worldview was just laid before us, and it seemed like I could see the whole world and the cosmos a bit differently, a bit, at least for a moment, a bit free from all of the sometimes problems that loom so large, especially in the news, for instance. So thank you so much. It was really wonderful. I wanted to ask you now, just to continue the conversation, just a few questions, if that's all right.
Of course.
I guess, and you sort of the whole presentation was about this, but I suppose I'll pose it to you a little more directly. And the question is, how do we get from here, where we are now, to there, where this society of, and this culture of oneness and unity and purpose and love, which you described, what are the means? How do we get from here to there? Well,
I think it's important to appreciate we're already on that journey. You know, I've been sort of journeying along this one for a long time, and it seems to me the last few years, and especially since the COVID actually, and it's very interesting. I write in my new book, The Story of Gaia, the viruses have always been Gaia's change agents. It's quite extraordinary, and the tiniest of her biological children literally stopped the world in that sense. And surely it was incredibly challenging, of course, but also I think it really shook us to start to shake us awake and say we cannot go on as we have been. So I think there are a number of things coming together. I think there's a recognition across many, many different fields and organizations that I'm involved in that, you know, enough is enough of the old ways of being. They are they're totally unsustainable. But we're not going from a standing start. And I'm sure as Janice will share and as John will share, you know, we have the economic models that can support a life economy rather than the economic models of separation and inequalities that support a death economy. So we have ways, and I think our worldview drives our behaviors. So if this whole worldview, if this evidence, which is, you know, 2 Nobel laureates in physics this year got their prizes because of their validation of non-local universality. Yeah, scientists across the board are coming forward and saying what I've just shared now. The more we can share it culturally, because this is what Chris talked to about the ancient, you know, the origin of culture is from the ground, is acculturation. And, you know, I think we're creating a mycelium network. And that it's that will help compost the old that is dying, that cannot be sustained, help compost that, help begin to heal and release the flourishing. And the more that happens, this is the wonder of physics and metaphysics, the more it does happen, the more it accelerates that process. So I think the more of us come together from all fields of interest and link up and lift up together, that is how we will get there. And ultimately, we'll get there because we love each other. And we love Gaia. And that's what we need now to really remember and embody.
Thank you, Jude. Yeah, I was just thinking about, you mentioned the role that emotions play in really changing people.
Yeah.
And how that sort of wonder and joy for this unitive narrative is going to bring that about. And I wanted to ask you about, there's another question I had, but it's sort of related to this statement. And that is, how do we, I guess today we look at the world and there's so much, on one hand, we see that there is, you know, division and separation, that the work isn't complete. And as you say, it's already started, it's underway, and that's very important to recognize. Yeah. But we also have to acknowledge the areas that hasn't quite, they're still pending, you know, it's still pending.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and it seems when you look at a lot of them, and perhaps increasingly, they're really about ideology and about sort of the ideologies that sort of underlay our societies and our culture. I'm wondering if you have anything to say about this bridging between ideologies, more so on what we would call the mental plane or the mind, and how that can meet, and perhaps also how that's related to the emotions and how that comes in.
I feel it's an attribute of a worldview of separation, actually. Yeah. Because if we're separate, there's an innate tendency to other. There's an innate tendency to, you know, it's the me and you, we are separate. If we're not alike, then there's a sense perhaps of fear of the unknown. You know, it's as though we've been in a dark room in a sense, you know, looking around, not being able to see each other as a reflection of ourselves. And so sort of touching each other in the dark and recoiling if it's not someone we're familiar with. So ideologies are natural ways of trying to find some sort of belonging or identity within a world of separation. If we can now appreciate, and as I say, this is evidence-based, this is our existential reality. If we can do all we can to share this understanding as widely as possible, in as many voices as possible, and as invitationally as possible, not imposing, but inviting and welcoming the wonder and the adventure, then as people, I think, feel more at ease with this and realize they're not going to lose their own identity, they're not going to go into some grey gloop of uniformity. Unity is not uniformity. Unity is radical diversity, but it's diversity in a belonging to the whole. And therefore, there is nothing that is not part of that whole. There is no separate you, different tribe, different ideology. We're all part of this incredibly beautiful, diverse family of humanity and a beautiful, diverse planetary sentience as Gaia. So I think we have this, but we do need to invite young people. We need to invite artists wherever they are, creatives wherever they are, everybody, because this is far greater than a revolution in science. This is truly an underpinning of a revolution of consciousness, it seems to me.
Thanks, Jude. I heard. I hardly know what else to ask you. It seems so comprehensive. Every answer you give to.
Sorry about that, Michael.
No, it's just so beautiful. Thank you. No, it's wonderful. I guess there's this. I'll just go with this. And it's, I guess, sort of along the artistic line a little bit is. If you could describe, and you sort of started to do it actually, but if you could describe if you could describe what sort of human culture you see emerging in the next 50 years, if humanity were to make all the right choices, and we were to be successful on every front and all the artists came together, as you say, how would you describe that world that we create? What would it look like?
It would be almost an embodiment of a really healthy ecosystem where everybody felt they belonged. They had, their own form and function that connected with all others, that was healthy, that was flourishing. And we actually remembered that we are innately part of Gaia's sentience. And so as we remember to be Gaians, we enter into a conscious co-evolutionary partnership with her. Because it would seem to me that we're at the bow wave of our entire universe's evolutionary impulse in the here and the now. And we know as cosmologists that there are probably more planets in our galaxy than there are stars. So think of all the galaxies and therefore all that abundance potentially of individuated consciousness that is on this bow wave together through the universe. We can take our place in that adventure that's not yet written, that's not yet lived, but can be. And how wonderful it could be and can be for us to perhaps remember not just our terrestrial heritage, but our whole Gaian heritage and our extraterrestrial and universal heritage, and to feel that embodied within us. William Blake wrote about seeing the universe in a grain of sand. Well, in a sense, the universe lives within us, and we are each cells of the universe. To know that, not just know that, but know that, and to live that, and to embody that, that is what I feel we can be. That's what I feel we can become.
It's almost unimaginable, perhaps, in some ways, as unimaginable as the technology was 200 years ago today. The sort of culture of consciousness that we may have in 50 or 100 years, probably we can't, imagine it really.
I don't know if you can see it, but I've got a rather large wooden apple behind me.
I do see, yeah.
That comes from Isaac Newton's home at Woolthorpe. And there's a wonderful local artisan that creates these. And of course, Isaac Newton famously saw an apple drop from a tree and went, aha, gravity. Well, the apple tree's still there. It's still fruiting apples.
Really? Wow.
And you think where we've come in 400 years.
Yeah.
And he had his annus mirabilis of seeing deeper into gravity and the cosmos and the nature of light at that time than anyone had before him. And he did that in the middle of a pandemic. So, you know, we're at this moment, we're at this possibility. Where now?
Thank you so much, Jude. Just looking at our time here, our time is about up. Thank you so much. It's been just a joy, and we are having a panel later. So if any of the audience has any questions they'd like to pose to Jude or to any of the panelists for that matter, you can save them up and be ready for them towards the end of our seminar today. Thank you so much, Jude.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone.
I'd like to invite now Janice Garrett to come on. Janice, and you can turn your video on and unmute yourself. Janice Garrett, who will be our next speaker, is an award-winning internationally active choreographer and dance educator. She is the founder and co-artistic director of Garrett Moulton Productions, which is a San Francisco-based performing arts organization whose programs nurture artistic expression and promote awareness of the capacity of the creative arts to transform individual and collective experience. Since 2002, she and her collaborative partner, Charles Moulton, have dedicated themselves to creating and presenting vibrant, life-affirming works of art that confirm the unity of life, the unity of the human family, and celebrate our shared humanity. In tandem with her 40-year career in the performing arts, she has also pursued the study and practice of meditation, energetic healing, intuitive clairvoyant reading, and from 1980 to 89, she founded and led an interfaith spiritual community in New York City. Janice, it's a joy to have you here with us, and I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks so much, Michael. And thanks to everybody at World Goodwill for inviting me to participate in today's seminar. I'm really honored to be joining all of you in this discussion centering on the search for a new culture and perspectives on human flourishing. And I'm hoping to contribute to the conversation by sharing my experience of creativity as a potent vehicle for experiencing and expressing connection and wholeness. Informing this presentation is my understanding that as human beings, we are all creators, and we each carry within us an unbounded capacity to create, to give birth to ideas and impulses that flow from our spirits through our imaginations. The life force that flows through us is by its nature boundlessly creative, and we are each given the extraordinary gift of being able to bring this creative flow into manifestation in an infinite variety of forms. And I believe that at this particular time in our evolution, we're being invited, in fact, really heartily encouraged to access our deepest reservoirs of creativity, to address the existential crises of our time through the unitive consciousness that Jude has so eloquently articulated in her presentation. What I'll be sharing with you is a combination of video excerpts and reflections on the creative path that I've traveled for the past 45 years, initially as a professional dancer and subsequently as a choreographer and dance educator. Though I trained at university as a mathematician, in my early 20s, I discovered that dancing, in all of its exacting rigor and joyous ebullience, enabled me to experience myself, or perhaps better said, my non-self, as pure energy or consciousness. And throughout my career, it's continued to be a powerful medium that's served to connect me with that which is universal, enabling me to experience much of the time a sense of oneness with all of life. And in this way, I consider myself to be extraordinarily blessed to be engaged in both a profession and a spiritual path that continually encourages and supports this awareness. The work that I'll be sharing with you today is work that I've done in collaboration with my creative and life partner, Charles Moulton. Together, over almost 2 decades, we've focused on exploring and expressing through our choreography the oneness and the interconnectedness of the human family. While recognizing that this oneness of life extends beyond the bounds of human life and in fact includes the wholeness of all of life, our work has dealt with the human side of the equation, and we've dedicated ourselves to working with the human body through the mediums of movement and dance. In doing this, one of the primary modalities that we've worked with is a theatrical form that we've evolved, which we call a movement choir. And the movement choir is a group of dancers who, much like the traditional Greek chorus, form a unified collective body that serves to comment upon and amplify the action in the choreographic work. It reflects a sense of shared human experience that embodies both the earthly and the ethereal, and it can convey a wide spectrum of experience ranging from a very grounded physical sense of community to representing at times the invisible forces that penetrate and move our lives. The first video excerpt that I want to share with you is the opening section of a full evening length piece set to the Italian Baroque composer Giovanni Battista Pergolesi's Stabat Mater. And for those of you that don't know, Stabat Mater is the 13th century Christian hymn that depicts the sorrow and suffering of the Mother Mary in witnessing the crucifixion of Christ. And we chose to work with this piece both because of its overwhelmingly beautiful articulation of sorrow and grief, and also the message of transformation that informs and infuses it. The music and the choreography convey the understanding that from the depths of grief and inner darkness, there can be a resurrection of the light. As you'll see in this video, the movement choir serves as a kind of living architecture, perhaps like a cathedral, a temple, a shrine, through which a group of 5 solo dancers travel and interact. And the piece is a shared journey in which the 24 performers individually and together are striving toward the light. And you'll see lots of uplifted gestures and reaching movements, all of which are appealing to the greater forces of the universe to address our yearning to be aware of ourselves as transcendent vessels of light and of love. So Michaela, if you're ready, we'll look at the Stabat Mater video, please. So the next excerpt that I want to share with you is another example of a large group performance piece, this one created by my collaborative partner, Charlie Moulton, that weaves together aspects of our movement choir work with his signature ball passing piece. Ball passing is an iconic postmodern dance work in which the simple act of passing a Nerf ball becomes a model for cooperation and a metaphor for the interdependence and interconnectedness of the human family. For both the participants and the audience, it's intended to uplift, unite, and inspire through the joy of collective endeavor. Over the years, many different versions of this piece have been created. This one, which involves 72 performers, is the largest to date and involves an intergenerational cast with ages ranging from 14 to 68, and participants from all walks of life, including students, IT professionals, firefighters, healthcare workers, teachers, to name a few. Before we view this excerpt, I just want to say a few words about play. In our work, Charlie and I have discovered the importance of liberating the imagination through play, improvisation, and other spontaneous acts of delight. In our efforts to discover and create forms that elevate, enliven, energize, and promote states of optimism, we've found that finding time to be playful is crucial and can easily go against the impulse to be productive all the time and to not ever waste time. And yet some of our favorite creations have been born of unanticipated moments of play that have led to surprising developments and unpremeditated wonderful results. And play is definitely a part of this next excerpt that you're going to see, which is from 72-person ball passing. Mikhail? Yeah, it's great. I'm reading these notes and comments that are coming in. Thank you all so much for those. We're coming to the end of our time here. I just, in closing, wanted to say a couple of things. And the main thing is that I really believe we're poised at a place in history in which we're being asked to direct our creative impulses toward a higher order. As transmitters of light, we have an infinite capacity to open doorways to new paradigms and to engage in shared endeavors that embody the beauty, the complexity, the interdependence, and the interconnectedness of our existence. And these can be small, delicate, daily acts of creation, a thought, a word, a gesture that we extend to ourselves and to the world, that play a real role in restoring our spirits and enabling us not just to survive, but to truly flourish. So thank you all so much for letting me share this with you. And I look forward to continuing our conversation in the panel discussion later in the seminar.
Thank you so much, Janice. It was marvelous. It was a real treat to see some of those pieces again. I am a bit familiar with them. Full disclosure, I actually used to dance with Janice's company in a past life, so it was it was a special joy for me to see you presenting and to see the work again. So thank you. And I have a few colleagues here at World Goodwill, and their comments as soon as the pieces were over echo exactly those in the chat. So
oh, nice.
It was marvelous. It was fantastic, wonderful. Just
thank you.
It was great. So I just looking at the time, I don't want to be too much of a with the time, but do you have perhaps I could just pose one question to you, Janice, if that's
Sure.
all right before we move on. I was going to ask more so about your creative process when you go to create a piece, specifically when you go out to conceive of a piece, like in the early stages when you're just thinking about, okay, what am I going to choreograph about? What's the next piece going to be? Could you speak a little more about your process, sort of as you come, your creative process as you come to approaching a new piece? Is it more of an intellectual approach? Is it more of an intuitive approach? Is it a marriage of the two?
Yeah, it's a real confluence of sort of heart, mind, matter, kind of what's in the body at the time. But, I think that guiding really all of the work that Charlie and I have been doing is this sense of how do we bring into form through choreography and dance images, energies of hope, of, again, connectivity, of how we can bring people together to have, it is an experiential thing for the performers as well, that the performers are experiencing their inside of the experience of what they're expressing. So the process and the work itself are completely knitted together. And I think somehow born out of that sort of intentionality, and then also, rubbing up against pieces of music, for example, the Stabat Mater, the first piece that we showed. Charlie and I had been listening to various versions of the Stabat Mater work for years and feeling drawn to that music. So sometimes it's the music, sometimes it's just a feeling, a sense, sometimes it's what arises out of the body, and then all of those things coming together. And it builds, the process builds over time, as you know, having been in the work, that you start out from a starting point and then it takes you in a lot of different directions, really kind of channeling and following the flow of what you're being guided to.
Thank you so much, Janice. It was marvelous. It was just pure, as you said earlier, experiencing yourself as pure energy. That's what we saw on stage. It was just pure energy. It was all those, what always struck me, and of course I'm a little biased because I used to dance for your company, of course, but what always struck me so much about your work is how much those qualities of unity, of consciousness, of right relationship, of goodwill actually come through when you watch the piece. They're not just sort of an inspiration for a creative process. They actually really come through when you witness it live in person, and even on the video as well, which, as you know, live performance isn't the same as a video performance, but it still comes through. So it's really exceptional to have you here. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael. It's just a pleasure.
And we will, as with Jude, the audience will have some time for questions to pose to Janice as well later in our panel today. But now we're going to move on to a visualization, which will be led by our my World Goodwill headquarter here, Kathy Newbern. So if we could just bring up the slide, Mikhail.
This visualization is called Lead Us from Chaos to Beauty. And it's really a visualization that grew out of that line, which the Tibetan teacher who wrote the books with Alice Bailey said is a new line that's coming about related to one of the most ancient mantras that's come down to us, which is called the ancient mantra, which goes, lead us, O Lord, from darkness to light, from the unreal to the real, from death to immortality. And then as we're entering into this new age of flourishing, this new line is being added, lead us from chaos to beauty. And so we can see with people like Jude and Janice and the work that they're doing, they are spearheading this movement from chaos to beauty. So this is a visualization that attempts to embody those words in living energy. So let's begin by coming together as a group, fusing on the mental plane, imagining the collective consciousness of all who are gathered here, coming together into one united spiritual organism, which will serve as a channel between the human kingdom and the kingdom of souls. And now let's imagine that we see before the group a square or oblong composed of a kaleidoscopic mass of inchoate colors, moving, pulsating, and in constant, indescribable confusion. And now see superimposed upon this square a radiant sun with a penumbra composed of the 7 prismatic colors. These colors radiate from the sun in regular rhythmic bands and produce a marvelous blaze of color. The background of the square appears to have a confusion of colors with a heavy and lurid quality, while the scheme of beauty that's emerging is translucent and delicate with a radiantly living hue. The heavier background can be distinctly seen through the translucence. Work creatively and imaginatively with this living symbol. As the group becomes sensitive to its magnetic field of revelation, imagine a new transparency of lighted meaning and spiritual order revealing itself. Now we'll take a moment to focus the mind at a point of spiritual tension and imagine the groups sounding together the formula, lead us from chaos to beauty. Visualize the bands of prismatic color radiating out from the sun through the group mind and heart, carrying those revelatory energies which are ready to emerge in the world. Distribution. Let the group affirm the fact of these impressions of beauty and synthesis being transmitted deep into the heart of human consciousness. In the center of all love, I stand. From that center, I, the soul, will outward move. From that center, I, the one who serves, will work. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group, and throughout the world.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, everybody. We'll now just take a 10-minute break. We were going to return at 2:20. It's now already 2:20. So let's just return back at, say, maybe we'll make it a 5-minute break. Return at 2:25, 2:26, 2:27, around that time. Thank you, everybody.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back after our very short break. Before we continue and hear from John Fullerton, let's take a few moments of silence and then say together the ancient Indian mantra, the Gayatri. O Thou, who givest sustenance to the universe, from whom all things proceed, to whom all things return. Unveil to us the face of the true spiritual sun, hidden by a disk of golden light, that we may know the truth and do our whole duty as we journey to thy sacred feet. But it's a great pleasure to introduce John Fullerton now. He's going to be speaking to us on the topic regeneration, economics, realigning with the patterns and principles of life. So John is the founder and president of Capital Institute and a recognized new economy thought leader and public speaker. John is an unconventional economist, impact investor, writer, and some have said philosopher. And he's the architect of regenerative economics, first conceived in his 2015 booklet, Regenerative Capitalism: How Universal Patterns and Principles Will Shape the New Economy. So after a successful 20-year career on Wall Street, where he was managing director of what he calls the old JP Morgan, John listened to a persistent inner voice and walked away in 2001 with no plan but many questions. And the questions crystallized into his life's work with the creation of the Capital Institute in 2010. And his work is now featured in the 8-week online course, Regenerative Economics: New Ways of Seeing, Thinking, Being, and Managing for the 21st Century. There's much more to say about John, but I think perhaps I should ask John to go ahead and with his talk now, and afterwards we'll have time for some discussion and questions.
Thank you, Chris. And it's really, really wonderful to be here with all of you. I'm grateful for the invitation. And I have to say, Janice, the last dance video gave me chills to the point I had to go put a sweater on. So I'm here, returned with a sweater after our short break. I think the best place to start for me is to tell you how I set off on this search, really. I am a searcher more than anything else. And it really began a quarter of a century ago while I was still working at JP Morgan. And I was grabbed by a question that I haven't been able to let go of. And that question is how to reconcile the invisible hand of capitalism, or free markets, or free enterprise system that Adam Smith proposed at the beginning of the scientific revolution with the golden rule. How to reconcile the invisible hand with the golden rule being, as I understand it, probably the single unifying ethic that crosses all of the world's great religions. And I actually started a study group in my church back in the late 1990s around that question. And the more we asked the question, the more it became clear to me that the two were really not reconcilable, certainly not the capitalist system, the way it was working and behaving. And so as you've heard, I left Wall Street in 2001. I planned to take the summer off, and the first day I went back to Manhattan to think about my next chapter of my life, I had a meeting set up with someone in Lower Manhattan, and the meeting was at 9:30. So I was on the subway heading downtown. And when we got to City Hall, which is 2 stops north of where I was going to get off, the subway doors opened and stayed open. And then someone came in and said, they just flew a plane into the Trade Center. And since my meeting was at 9:30 and it was only 9:10 and the subway wasn't going anywhere, I figured I might as well get out and see what happened. And I assumed I'd see a little Piper Cub private plane that maybe the wing nicked one of the buildings, and it was going to be a catastrophe for the pilot and who was ever in the plane, and maybe some people on the ground. And so when I got to the street, and you know where this story is going, the second plane had just hit the second tower, and I witnessed the fireball in front of my eyes. I was far enough away to be safe, but I was close enough to see over time the curtains blowing out the windows on the top floor as people punched the windows out and looked out over their fate. So that was, I guess, my experience of being stabbed awake, as we've just heard, and it pushed me into a deep introspective period. Here I was essentially unemployed, didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, 41 years old, and the world had just turned inside out, and I didn't know how to explain it to my kids when I finally got home that day. And that sent me on this search, and what I'd like to share with you is kind of at least the current results of that search. So I'm going to go through a series of slides pretty quickly just to keep me focused. And then I'm going to end with another story. Is everyone able to see my slide? Someone maybe?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michael, or whoever said that. So I've titled this talk "Moment of Truth," and it's remarkable how well this fits into what you've already heard from Jude and from Janice. You will think that we rehearsed this more than we did, but it's really an extension of each of those 2 talks in my own way. While I was in that sort of what I call deep think period after I left Wall Street, I read a ton, and I read many spiritual books and philosophical books first. And I wrote a paper in, I think it was 2008. I call it my coming out of the closet paper. And it was titled "The Relevance of Schumacher, E.F. Schumacher in the 21st Century." And at the end of it, I quoted Tolstoy, the quote you're reading, because it really grabbed me and has been what I've been trying to do ever since. And the quote reads, this is from "The Kingdom of God is Within You." The sole meaning of life, and I was deeply searching for what the meaning of life was at that moment for myself, is to serve humanity by contributing to the establishment of the kingdom of God, which can only be done by the recognition and profession of the truth by every man. And I'm sure if he were alive and wrote it today, he would say by every man and woman. What I didn't know is that he was one of Gandhi's most important teachers. And I believe in the last year of Tolstoy's life, they exchanged many, many letters, although never met. So my search, my conclusion was that the economic system was the root cause of many of the problems that I was learning about in my search, in particular, the systemic ecological crises that we were beginning to experience. This was again back in the early 2000s. And that as one peeled back the onions, the layers of the onion about our economic system and the financial system that drives it, one goes all the way back to the beginning of the scientific revolution to find the fatal flaw. And it's fascinating and terrifying, but just as our worldview prior to Copernicus was that the Earth was the center of the universe, and the astronomers spent literally over 1,000 years trying to explain the wobbles that they could see that weren't logical, without fundamentally questioning the assumption about the Earth being in the center of the universe. Neoclassical economics is grounded on Newtonian physics and has never been updated by the advances of our scientific understanding, particularly the advances that Jude described about that are quite recent. But they were never, the neoclassical economics was never even updated to our understanding of quantum physics, which has been around for a long time, much less our understanding of living system science. And the thing about, the other thing to say about that period of time is that, interestingly, it was when the first genocide in North America occurred. And what's fascinating to me is I've moved to a little town called Stonington, and Mystic is really literally at the edge of Stonington. And so I've moved to literally ground zero of the beginning of the North American genocide by the European settlers. And so we in America, which is of course where our economic system, power base lies, was destined to ignore indigenous wisdom at our great expense, our collective great expense. And I won't dive into this here, but just to give you a little bit of evidence, Irving Fisher was one of the greatest economists of all time. Were he alive when the Nobel Prize was awarded in economics, which isn't really a true Nobel Prize, but that's a story for another day, he certainly would have won it for his work on the establishment of neoclassical economics, which again is the foundational theory of how economics is understood. It's what's taught in school today. It's essentially the foundation of economics, whether you fall in the kind of more free market side of the ideological spectrum or the more government intervention side of the spectrum, much less socialism. Neoclassical economics is the foundation of all of these approaches. And in his textbook, you will see the visual I'm showing where he equates a particle in mechanics, meaning Newtonian physics, with an individual in an economy. And these economists were literally trying to establish that there was natural laws of economics similar to the Newtonian laws of physics. And where that has led us, as we've continued to try to patch together the obvious problems with this, is that the Nobel Prize in Economics was actually awarded in 2018 to an economist named William Nordhaus for his work on climate change that he spent his life, professional life on. And the output of his model that won the Nobel Prize in Economics was that we should shoot for 3.5 degrees warming, because any lower target would cost too much in terms of economic growth. Now that happened not 50 years ago, but 4 years ago. And so I would suggest that the entire economic profession is resting on a essentially bankrupt foundation, and we continue to try to patch the problems, as the early astronomers tried to patch the problems with a Earth-centered universe. And of course, this is nothing new. The crux of the matter boils down to a very simple, to me, self-evident truth, which is that infinite growth on a finite planet cannot go on forever. So we're in trouble. We're in trouble because the old story of what we told ourselves, and this is true at a cultural level, but I would suggest that our economy has become so profoundly important and fundamental and affects our culture so overwhelmingly that the story of how our economy works is inseparable from the story of how our culture or our cultures can work. And we're in between stories, and the old story no longer works, and we're in search of a new story. So let me start with a few of what I think are important truths. These are very similar to what you've already heard. We, and by definition, the human economy, are a part of nature, not a part from nature. Our extractive economic system is an entropy accelerant. That's bad. Entropy is the second law of thermodynamics, which means matter and energy moves from order to disorder. That's why it feels so chaotic. But I'm saying we are an entropy accelerant, both physical entropy, but also what I'll metaphorically refer to as social and spiritual entropy. It benefits the few at the cost of everything we hold dear. And so it's like we're chicks in an egg that have eaten through all the protein, and we've bumped into the wall, the shell, and we're having to break through the shell and actually remember, again, a word you've heard many times, what our actual place in the universe is really all about. And so this is profoundly new and profoundly different than anything that humanity has experienced before. And I equate it to the shift, and it's analogous in scope and scale to the shift between the medieval era and the modern era. But in truth, the consequences and the implications are far greater. And so this transformation is far bigger than any shift in prior history. So we need to change the economic system. That is the core of my work. Monica Sharma, who spent her career at the United Nations, people credit her for solving the AIDS crisis. She is a force of nature. She has a beautiful framework where she describes how, many of us get up in the morning and we're working on whatever problem it is that we work on. If we're in a business, we're trying to solve a problem that creates the purpose for our business. If we're in government, if we work in a nonprofit, we're in problem solving. Humans are problem solvers, and that's great. There's some of us that choose to pursue this rising consciousness as a change strategy. And I've become very intrigued with this recently. And then some people are involved in the system level, the system change level. And you can go get a PhD at MIT in system science. And I would say I'm primarily focused on the system level, the economic system and the financial system level. But Monica's point is, if you want to change the world, you need to work at all three of these layers at the same time. And you need to begin with the inner work. And so the power is in the inner work. The level of consciousness is what gives the system, or said differently, the system we have arises out of the level of consciousness of the culture that it is born into. And our problems are uniquely designed by the system that created them. So if we want to solve those problems, we need to work across all of these three at the same time. And this is the challenge we have at this moment, which is that the mechanistic reductionism, the scientific method itself, which has been responsible for all the progress over the last 400 or 500 years, and it's probably literally changed us at a genetic level, is incredibly powerful for certain things, but woefully inadequate to understand the complexity of how life and living systems actually work. I like to quote Wes Jackson, who is a scientist, who says, and his work is brilliant, by the way. If you haven't heard of him, he's a plant scientist and working on creating perennial plants to grow grains from. Long story for another day. But Wes says there is nothing wrong with the reductionist method so long as we don't confuse the method for how the world really works. And of course, that's exactly what we've done. So we're in this moment of exponential complexity, but we're really good at what's complicated, and we're not very good at even recognizing, much less managing complexity. So what's complicated are machines. What's complex are the human body, families, the United Nations, corporations, the global economy, and of course, all living systems of Gaia. So we need in economics a new theoretical framework, and most people like to be action-oriented and do things, and the expression seeing is believing. So let's build models and show them, and people will get it. And that's certainly true. But what I think Einstein means by this quote is that believing is also seeing. In other words, our belief systems, our ideological belief systems blind us to even seeing things as they are. And so I try to take this holistic living systems understanding that I have studied and apply it to the economic system. And a quick definition, this is from the 2015 paper. It's on my website, capitalinstitute.org, if folks are interested. Regenerative economics is the application of nature's laws and patterns of systemic health, self-organization, self-renewal, and regenerative vitality to socioeconomic systems. Now, this is not a new idea. It turns out Bucky Fuller, his final book that he left to humanity after his long and distinguished career was a little book called Grunch, and it was his critique of capitalism. And in it, he wrote, nature is a totally efficient, self-regenerating system. If we discover the laws that govern this system and live synergistically within them, sustainability will follow and humankind will be a success. What was clear that he meant, if you read the book, was that if we don't do this, humankind will not be a success. And what's important here is to understand this regenerative process of living systems, the regenerative process that's happening in our bodies as we're having this conversation, is the process that defines how life works. And sustainability and thriving is the outcome of that process. So, regenerative economics is not a new name for sustainability. It's not a political philosophy of the left or the right, and it's not simply an agricultural or environmental idea, although its traction began in agriculture. Permaculture, for example, is an expression of regenerative agriculture. The idea of regenerative economy is premised on three important assumptions. First, the economy is a living system. We can have a debate on that. Second, that there are actually patterns and principles that describe how all living systems that have actually sustained themselves, that's why they're living systems, not dead systems, how they work in the real world. That's living system science. That's not an opinion. That is now rigorously being studied. And finally, premise number three, if our human economy is to be sustainable, much less to thrive and be healthy and whole over the long run, it too will need a system design that aligns with these same patterns and principles. Otherwise, it will eventually not be a living system. It will be an unhealthy system like it is today, and perhaps even collapse. Now, I've tried to reduce these patterns and principles. Again, note we've shifted into reductionist thinking in order to communicate. I won't try to go through these here, but again, this information is on our website, in the paper, and in some other material there. Note, and I promise this is not not rigged. The first principle is in right relationship, and Janice, I talk about this in my talks, but Jude had a beautiful visual of the relationship between the Earth and the sun and the moon, which is just right. And unfortunately, in our human economy, we have many more relationships that are extractive, if not abusive, as opposed to right relationships. The other 8 principles you can read about. I might just point out the one, again, reflecting what Jude said earlier, seeks balance. One of the fundamental imbalances, harmonic balance that's out of balance, is the balance between masculine and feminine energy. And I mean, I can talk for an hour about all these. I don't want to do it now, but the big idea here is that there is, if we align with these 8 principles or any other expression of how life works, these aren't the quote right principles. These are my best effort to describe them in the context of an economy. If we align our economy and our businesses and our government activities, everything that's comprised, that makes up the economy, with these patterns and principles, there is literally infinite potential for us to realize in the future. And when people question, well, if we can't have physical growth anymore, how are we going to find prosperity? My answer is that our prosperity lies in the prosperity of life itself, which is magical and beyond any linear expression of our understanding. As mentioned earlier, we do have a course on this. This is a little invitation. We'll be running another version of it next year. You can sign up on our website. It's been an extraordinary experience for all of us participating in it. And I'd like to end with a little nod to the cosmologists again. This time a different one, Brian Swim, who with Mary Evelyn Tucker wrote a beautiful book called Journey to the Universe. And in my education and learning with them, they've agreed with me that the essence of Gaia, in fact, the essence of the universe, is creativity, which is where Janice comes in. And in fact, people have suggested that my course is actually an artifact. And I actually think that's probably a more accurate description than a course. And to quote out of the Journey of the Universe, there's something amazing about a universe whose overall journey depends in critical moments, I would suggest like now, upon the transformations taking place in the microcosm. We can begin to contemplate an idea that is remarkable. Perhaps the nature of the universe as a whole is shaped by the creativity of the parts. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if I have another couple minutes, I'd like to end with a personal story. And this is, I have a book here called Mysticism. I don't know if you can see it in the camera. It's unforgettable because of the color of the cover. And as you can see, it's quite old. And the reason I'm sharing this is that I read this in college. And my mom is a very spiritual lady. She's into all kinds of esoteric things, you know, astrology and numerology, that kind of stuff. I'm sure many of you out there are as well. And I read this in college. I can't remember. I seem to think it was in an English class, but don't ask me why I would have read a book called Mysticism in an English class. This is, by the way, written by Evelyn Underhill, who is the book was written in 1911, and she was the preeminent mystic scholar at the time, Western mysticism scholar. And I just thought, I must have liked the book, and I knew my mom would enjoy it. So I gave it to my mom when I graduated college, however many, 1982. And she enjoyed it and kept it. And more recently, like 2 years ago, and remember, the first draft of my regenerative economics paper was in 2012. So I've been on this for a while. And I recently met with her, recently meaning before the pandemic, but recently in our lives. And she'd been struggling to write, and she wanted to write something for me and leave it for her kids. And she's now 93, and she's really not capable of writing a book anymore. So I said to her, Mom, why don't you just give me a few of your books that mean the most to you? And knowing that she underlines and makes notes, and then I would sort of get this sense of what was important to her by reading her books. And she said, "Oh, that's a good idea, John." So she turned around and reached on her bookshelf, and the first book she handed me was this book. So I took it home and I started reading it, again, pre-pandemic, but not that long ago. And I got to about page 60 or so, and then noticed that in the back of the book, on one of the blank pages, there were, and you probably can't see this, but there's about 6 or 7 page numbers just scribbled down in her writing. And next to one of them, page 128, is an exclamation point. So I figured, may as well go to page 128, see what's there. And on page 128, Underhill describes the 3 types of mystics. And I won't read this to you, but there's essentially 3 paragraphs here at the bottom, A, B, and C. And the first type of mystic is the sort of the metaphor is the quest, the mystic who goes up to the mountaintop in search of God. Paragraph B is the second type of mystic. And the metaphor is the marriage of the soul to God. The mystic falls in love with God, and it's the marriage, the relationship, which is the essence of their approach. And then it gets to paragraph C, the third type of mystic. And it's essentially describing there's a strange spiritual seed within them by whose development man, moving to higher levels of character and consciousness, attains his end. We'll see the mystic life as involving inward change rather than outgoing search, period. Next sentence, regeneration is their watchword. And it goes on to explain this third type of mystic were the spiritual alchemists. And at this moment in profound transformation, I have great confidence that the universe is pulling us toward this idea of transformation. And we all are spiritual alchemists at this moment. Thanks.
Well, John, that was amazing. Thank you so much. There seems to be so much synchronicity in this seminar, which is wonderful. And I suppose it shouldn't be surprising. Where to start? I think we've got about 10 minutes. And when I was very struck by your insightful presentation and your incredible personal experiences, which you shared with us as well. And I love the fact that you walked away from the security of your work within one paradigm or thought form, and that it took many years in which you meditated and pondered on and researched and no doubt shared with others answers to your questions. And when you found them, you made your formula of principles. And I just would recommend to anybody to Google your work in regenerative economics and read and reflect on those 8 principles. Because we probably didn't do them justice. As you say, there wasn't time. So your experience is really a living example, an expression that every field, and especially practical fields like economics, are deeply spiritual in their underlying principles and motivations. And so your 8 principles are all interconnected and have to be used together, and they connect with other fields of service and human activity too. So thank you for sharing that finding with us. You know, it shows you how long a meditation might have to take before you do find those answers. So we could take some questions. Sorry? Sorry?
Sorry, Chris, we just had
Sorry, John.
some crosswind there. Just continue. Sorry.
Okay, oh, that's all right. So, John, we could take a couple of questions. So if you have any thoughts to share, please raise your hand. But while we're waiting for that, I'd like to ask you, what do you think are the biggest challenges that remain to the transformation of our economic system? That's a hard one, I know. Maybe just the biggest challenge, not plural. Are they material, or would you say they exist more in consciousness? And I think that's what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, the challenges are gigantic. I mean, this idea is still way out on the fringes. It's changing, and as I can't remember if it was Janice or Jude was saying, but the pandemic has changed things. Believe it or not, Walmart has declared it wants to become a regenerative company. And, you know, I'm not sure that's possible, but it shows you that it's entered the zeitgeist. And now many businesses are running around trying to figure out what this word means and how it applies to them. And of course, there'll be greenwashing and all that, but something has shifted as a result of the pandemic for sure. But to answer your question, and I don't, this is not good news. I have to say that finance and our finance ideology and our attachment to money and our fear of not having money and a fear of scarcity, and it all gets to the separation issue again, it feels overwhelming, and we are in lock-in around that. That's the bad news. The good news is that one of the things I learned about systems from system scientists is that systems only change in response to pressure. And so we don't actually have to change the system. We need to guide the change that's going to happen as a result of the continually rising pressure. And but I'd have to answer finance ideology, and not the bad behavior of the financiers. It's finance ideology itself, which is the bigger problem.
Sorry, what do you mean by financiology?
Oh, sorry. So, you know, as soon as you start talking about finance,
Yeah.
you're lost. What I mean by that is that we run the economy around the idea that if we optimize the financial return on invested capital, and we set up a system that's as efficient as possible in order to do that, we will create wealth and prosperity, and that will, you know, then that will then be the source of our well-being. When, of course, the whole idea of optimizing efficiency is in conflict with the principle of imbalance. Living systems balance efficiency with resiliency. Globalization was a push toward efficiency. Well, we're learning the hard way that global supply chains aren't particularly resilient. So everything that's been happening is from 9/11 to the financial crash to the current supply chain chaos to the pandemic is, in my understand, or the way I see it, the universe teaching us the lessons. Oh, by the way, also the Ponzi scheme of Bernie Madoff. The universe is putting in front of our face the lessons we need to learn. And most recently with Trump and the post-truth era, we're being told we need to learn to say the truth, which gets me right back to Tolstoy.
Yeah, to truth. Yeah. Thank you, John. Right, let's take a few people from the audience. Steve Nation.
Hi, John. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, John. Look, this has been wonderful. Not just your talk, but the whole, I was fortunate to be able to start listening to the London event. And so we've had this incredible picture of the mystical alchemism that's taken place within every profession. You've spoken in terms of probably the most fundamental issue, which is money and economics. And the comment I wanted to make just is that your own personal story, as Chris emphasized, told about the value of time, that the depth of the change of the story cannot be, requires depth, because the transition is about spiritual, moving from mysticism to mystic alchemy. I think those are the words you used. And at every level, whether you look at that metaphysically or concretely, that is the depth of the transition. And the positive sign is that that is taking place. In other words, it's almost as if, sure, the problem of economics looks impossible, the financial ideology. It looks impossible. And yet, in spite of that, let me see, UNESCO's latest UNESCO's work on the future vision of education, to my mind, speaks something of the spirit of mystic alchemy. Monica Sharma's work and the impact that Monica Sharma's having within the UN, but now more significantly amongst every profession. If you look at presencing, if you look at the whole, not just regenerative agriculture, but if you look at the impact that the regenerative story is having, to my mind, it gives a much more positive vision, because we can't expect this transition to happen in 10 years or something. It's of a depth, it has to be of a depth. And in the London event, there was an incredible story about radical imagination when he spoke about the huge transitions that happen in history as in terms of a volcano. And then he spoke about the molten lava, the molten lava that comes out, and the process of crystallizing that lava, how incredibly significant that is. And then speaking just to our group, for whom you very kindly presented, to say that throughout the seminar, in a sense, our task, and the task of every real group that tries to consciously be mystic alchemists, is to observe this story as it's coming into its human incarnation with great love, and to focus on the will, to see how the will of the human is awakening at an appropriate level to the crisis, because that is the sign of greatest hope. And it's very difficult to measure time. Anyway, that's so. Joe, thank you, John. I really appreciate it.
That was a great contribution. Thanks for sharing it. I'll just make one quick reflection on it. I agree with you that all of this talk of we have 10 years, blah, 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 the truth is we're really late. We're decades late. We don't have 10 years. We're already too late. And it will happen in ways that no one is predicting, whatever it is. And so I like to remind people how, we're in this collapse, which will free up resources. In ecology, there's this idea of the adaptive cycle and the energy, there's sort of creativity and growth and maturation, and then collapse, and then out of the collapse comes the energy to rebuild and to reform. And the good news is, as Janine Benya said to me once, the bad news is we're on the back of the cycle in the collapse phase. The good news is the backside of the cycle goes very quickly. And it reminds me of, the expression, how does a company go bankrupt? And the answer is slowly and then quickly.
Exactly.
So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, John. We'll just take one more, and then I think Michael will probably want us to stop at that point to bring in the others for questions. David Himmel. David?
Yes, thank you.
Himmelstein, sorry.
Concretely, pragmatically, is it possible that the urgency of converging crises will trigger a worldwide grassroots movement for peace and ecological healing? Maybe like a kind of spontaneous satyagraha.
Definitely possible. I don't know the answer. There is a movement, people referring to the next generation as the regeneration. And I think what is happening with our kids, the mental health crisis, kids are not having kids. My kids, 2 of 3 of my kids have already decided they don't want to have kids. I think there's going to be change that we can't foresee that's going to be part of the solution, and maybe something just like you just described, but it's unknowable. And our challenge is to sit with that and be okay with that and dance with that, as opposed to, there we go.
You're walking the talk.
Bringing Janice back in to dance with that and live in that discomfort that we don't know.
Well, you're walking the talk. Yeah, so you're part of the solution.
I think we all are.
Thank you, David. John, thank you very much. I just wanted to say that your mention of Evelyn Underhill's mysticism book is in our library, and
Wow.
most of our students will be very familiar with it. I think a fantastic author
Really?
and spiritual person. Yeah.
The crowd I normally hang out with will have never heard of it.
well, I think I'm going to revisit it after your talk, actually. It's brilliant.
I mean, obviously, when I found that, if you think about like how that must have, I started crying. I mean, I was just dumbstruck. There's no words to describe what happened to me at that moment.
It's sort of look and you shall find kind of moment. You know, you've been searching, and there it came.
And I read it, but I read it in college.
Yeah.
I just didn't see it.
Yeah, you weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Michael.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks so much, John. I just wanted to invite our other speakers, Jude and Janice, to turn their videos back on, their mics back on, and we can have just sort of with the last remaining time, we're going to close with a meditation, but with the remaining time before that, if we could just have sort of a panel discussion and some time for Q&A with the audience as a group. So I think we have such powerful and strong speakers, and there is speaking about synchronicity, there's this real synchronicity, totally unplanned, by the way, amongst all 3 of you. We had wanted to plan a meeting, but it didn't work out because schedules and everything, but it's as if we had met and planned it all. So
I know.
Just wanted to start out, and we'll open up to audience questions in just a moment, but just by posing all 3 of you the same question, and then you can all answer in your own way, from your own perspective, whether that's science or economics or dance, or however you want to answer it, of course. But the question is, if you could each describe in your own words what human flourishing is, thinking of human flourishing really as, you know, a real thriving of all aspects of the human spirit, however you define that. You know, what is human flourishing, and what does it look like if you were to imagine it, or if maybe you had witnessed it and you could describe what that looked like? Happy for any of you to just jump in and go first, or we could roll a dice maybe.
Ladies first.
It takes too long.
Shall we go in order?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Judy. Go ahead.
I feel we're passing the ball on that amazing video
Yeah.
Janice showed. I guess I love our synchronicities, because I feel this is what is happening now. I mean, for me, synchronicities have been my way showers. When when I'm aware of and attend to a synchronicity, it always brings me further down this amazing journey of inner and outer discovery. And I think that's what's alive in this. For me, what human flourishing is about our being in the doing of our innate wholeness. So it's a whole beingness rather than just a well-beingness. And it's expanding our awareness, as Einstein talked about, the cycle, the circle of compassion. So the me and the we and the all. And I love trinities. There was a beautiful graphic shown when we had a break about triangles. So I'm big on triangles. And we know the pixelation of the information of our universe is actually triangulated at the Planck scale, just to be nerdy about it. But, you know, this sense of triangles is masculine, feminine, child. It's the head, the heart, the hands. And it's, as John showed, the problem solving, the systems attendance and the consciousness. And for that, it's the act local, feel global, think cosmic. So it's bringing it all together. You know, there's nothing outside the wholeness. It's all the incredible diversity and love and joy and gratitude within that. And I'll just finish by saying, years and years ago, when I was doing my PhD, I was doing some archaeological field walking in a gorgeous field near Avebury, which I know Janice loves. And out of a clear blue sky came these words: in the commonality of our humanity, we're all ordinary. In the commonality of our divinity, we're all extraordinary. And I just feel that our human flourishing is that dance between our ordinary, extraordinary, extraordinary and ordinary. And I'd just like to finish by saying I am a cosmologist. I am also a qualified accountant who ran 500 million. And ABBA is my favorite music, and my favorite is Dancing Queen. So, you know, I'm just feeling this for all of it. So the ball is passed, Julie, to Janice or John.
I just feel like so much of this whole seminar has addressed that whole question of flourishing, and it, you know, to try to crystallize it into, well, of course, for me, so much of my life I've been drawn to non-verbal ways of expressing wholeness. But I do know that for me, there is an aspect of flourishing that has a lot to do with alignment, and how it is individually we're aligned with our spirituality, how we're aligned with others, how collectively we're aligned, in a sense of kind of balance and the interplay that we have in listening and acting. So those feel like really central elements to me of the experience and the process of encouraging us to flourish. Finding that balance between action and listening. John was talking so much about that in his experience. And attending to all the many facets of alignment that occur in our individual and collective lives.
I guess my, well, the first thought that came through my mind was also the dancing balls in terms of flourishing. That was so beautiful. And I need to get access to that, Janice, for my course. But I guess after I think about it further, you know, in addition to that feeling is, you know, the power of the search and the journey I've been on has been to feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself. And it's really, there's something about the flow state that athletes and artists experience. I've experienced flow state in my teenage years. And at the beginning of my course, I put a picture up and asked everyone to imagine if there could be an economy in flow state, which doesn't feel at all possible when you feel about what happens as a result of the economy and how work feels to most of us, unfortunately. But yeah, it's to me, it's this remembering with something far greater than ourselves, which is so incredible. in the face of all of the challenges. It's still incredible. And by the way, there's many more synchronicities floating around this little room than people are even aware of. I could share them, but I don't want to hog the space. So
Now we want to hear it.
Now we want to hear at least one of them.
well, so I shared this with Janice in an email, but I actually had the privilege of getting to know Jacques D'Amboise. I was on his board. He is, for those who don't know, one of well, Janice can explain. I think he's was one of the preeminent dancers in his generation, he had an education program called National Dance Institute that used dance as a method of teaching, which was brilliant. And Jude doesn't know this, but and I'm feeling like I feel like an idiot to say this, but it is a synchronicity. I was in a film called Going Circular that featured James Lovelock. And so it's just amazing.
Yeah.
And I didn't know you wrote a book called Gaia until so anyway. It's crazy.
It is great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought now I'll pose just one more question and all of you can answer, and then but I'd also like to pose the same question perhaps to the audience as well. And of course, if they'd instead like to raise their hand and pose a question, that's fine as well. But just really to the whole group, presenters and audience as well. And this question really focuses in on the quality of love, which I think is fundamental, of course, to all of our work at World Goodwill, all of our spiritual work, and is really, I think, perhaps the quintessence of flourishing and of everything we've been talking about. Certainly, it's the quintessence of right relationship as well. And of course, we know it's on a larger level, it's a great cosmic principle. Actually, love is much further beyond even human relationship, or even beyond the humanity's relationship with the planet. It goes much bigger than that. It's a fundamental principle of the way the unseen and the seen worlds have come about, in the way and the manner in which they exist. But the question is a little less cosmic. Really, I'd like to ask each of you if you could give one anecdote from your work or your research, or perhaps even your personal life, if you'd like. Of course, you don't have to, about where you have seen this energy of love in any of its many forms come about, be expressed, shown its face, because we know love has many different faces, many different expressions. If you could just share one instance of where you've seen that or experienced it. And of course, audience, also you're welcome to raise your hand and share as well.
Shall I go first again?
If you could.
Actually, I always prefer to go last, but I can see Janice and John go, no. Couple of things on this. Before I speak to love, very briefly, John talked about, the way in which evolution works through systems, bifurcation, and all the systems work. And writing the story of Gaia, I really went through this sort of breakthrough, whole process over 4.5 billion years. And at each time there's a breakdown on a biological scale, there was what was called horizontal gene transfer, incredibly rapid, to develop whole new ways of biological organisms and entire ecosystems within the Gaia sphere. But we're now at a point of potentially conscious evolution. So I'm tending to replace the horizontal gene transfer with an idea of horizontal meme transfer. So if we can bring this sense of this evidentially based underpinning and framing, this whole worldview, this unity narrative, this whatever, so all the memes that John and Janice and all of us have the ability and the invitation to bring forward and share. And the wonderful thing is, we have the technology that allows that enables horizontal meme transfer. We talk about viral. Well, can we empower and inspire viral meme transfer based on wholeness, based on love, based on kindness, based on joy, based on gratitude. And what I'm sharing is essentially the science of love. This is it. This cosmology of a living and evolving universe, unified universe, is a science of love. So experiencing it, I'll go back to Janice. That first piece you showed moved me to tears. That sense of that entire grief of Mother Mary. And I want to share a story of where I was when I was in Ephesus. And the tradition says that after the crucifixion and the resurrection, that St. John the Divine, John of Revelation, and Mary moved north to Turkey. And at Ephesus, there is a tomb purported to be his. And there was a mystically guided excavation that seemed to excavate the house of Mary of that time. And all I can share is that being there was the embodiment of love. Was the embodiment of a life that went through that incredible love of giving birth, love and pride of her son growing up, desperate grief, and then finding a way to heal and come to peace and come through that process and be transformed by that entire journey into a state of bliss. And in that place, I felt that bliss. I'm so grateful to be there and experience that. So that is me.
That's beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, Michael, when you posed the question, I just went with the very first thing that came into my mind. And it relates to the pandemic, because for me, the pandemic did provide an opportunity for tremendous energies of love and compassion to flow through the earth plane. And the personal experience that I had was that my mother passed away during the early months of the pandemic. And a couple of days into her death process, her passing, it was determined that she had COVID. And of course, in those early days, there was so much unknown about it, and many people dying and being very, very ill. And watching and being in the presence of the hospice workers who stayed so present and gave so much love to her without any regard. And we talk about how love, is the absence of fear. It's like they had no fear at all. They were so present with my mother through her journey all the way to the end, without concern for their families, for their own children. They just stayed present and completely in a state of love. And it was amazing to experience. So that's. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry for your loss, Janice.
Thank you, Janice.
Absolutely, Janice.
I thought I would lose my mom as well to the pandemic, communicating through a glass window for a period of time. Well, like Janice said, what I'll share is what came up first for me as well, which wasn't hard because it happened yesterday. In our course, we have a series of it's not like lectures, it's a series of dialogues and practice labs. And yesterday we had the brilliant Nora Bateson, who I'm sure Jude knows, either Nora or her father's work. Gregory Bateson was one of the giants of living system science, one of the early giants. And Nora does something called a warm data lab. And she's all about the essence of relationships being at the heart of life as opposed to the parts. Again, it's holism. Gregory Basin used to give talks and he'd put his hand up and he'd say, what do people see? And people would say 5 fingers or a hand. And he'd say, yeah, what else? And then everyone would be stumped. And then he'd say, there are 4 relationships that create the essence of a hand. And so Nora sends us off into little, we're all on Zoom. There's like, I don't know, 100 people, and we all get paired off in groups of 3 or 4. And she leaves us with a question about remembering and using different contexts, like our education, our history, our work, but there's no desired outcome. There's no purpose of it other than just to remember with each other. And I can't do justice to the process, but we did it 3 times, 10 minutes times 3 times, total strangers each time, by and large, because we're all on a Zoom course. And the effect of it was like a group meditation. That calm everyone had back in the Zoom room, you could feel it. And there were tears everywhere. It was an awakening experience for people to be in relationship with human beings with no pretense on who they were, what their job was, what their status was, what they were trying to accomplish. They just shared, they just remembered their humanity together. And I bet you half the people were in tears.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Janice and Jude, of course, as well. I'd like to open it up now to the audience. I see a few hands up. We can just go with Cielito. Asking you to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you for this extraordinary program. I'm glad I was able to attend. And just to quickly answer your question, Michael, about seeing the energy of love expressed. Well, Jesus said where 3 or more are gathered. And I'm always astounded in the most mundane situations where 3 or more are gathered, how the energy of love expresses, whether it's at the community gym or at the library, or it's when I allow my self-centered thinking to, stay in the backpack next to me, or stay out of the room, and just allow myself to experience other people without thinking about myself. That's when I see the energy of love. What I love about this panel is that it's reminding me of the principle of harmony out of conflict. And of course, this community understands the 4th ray expression through humanity of harmony out of conflict. So I wanted to hear from anyone, the panelists or anyone who'd like to respond, what is my question? How have you, in your particular arena, how have you responded to conflict and transformed it into harmony? That's probably the simplest way to ask it. Thank you.
And maybe we could take maybe one more question and then you could all just answer them both. Just a little faster to get a few questions, so if that's all right with you guys. David Trice.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, David. Yeah, we hear you.
Hello, Michael. We've heard some beautiful, wonderful, comprehensive ideas, Mr. Fullerton, on capitalism and economics. But I had the experience that half the world's population live on $2 a day, and they're starving. And I hope that these ideas that we have discussed in this presentation can be applied to that in a little bit of more emphasis of a way. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So if any of the speakers would like to take on either of those.
Well, maybe I'd start with the second one, since that's more directed to what my contribution was. I mean, I couldn't agree more, David. And you know, come to our course. I'll just say a couple things. One of the principles of how living systems work, that is part of the 8, is called empowered participation. And empowered participation doesn't mean inclusion. It doesn't mean be charitable. It means that our feet are empowered to participate in the circulation of oxygen. And that's essential, not just for our feet, love them that as we might, that's essential for our holistic health. And so the health of the global, the health of global civilization has been horribly damaged by the fact that half of the planet lives on $2 a day. And so the short answer to your question is that this idea is not meant to be a developed, rich world idea. And in fact, just as our health as human beings begins at a cellular level, I believe the regenerative economy begins at a place-based bioregional level and works its way up from there.
I'm happy to go next. And absolutely, John, that's my experience as well. I do a lot of work with the regenerative community and the educational community and conscious business and many, many other, you know, ways of coming together with this understanding and moving forward. I'd like to respond to Silito's question about resolving conflict. How do we come into harmony from conflict? And I'd like to respond by quoting Monica Sharma, who you spoke of, John. And I had a conversation with Monica a while ago, and she actually tells a wonderful story of when she was working in the Middle East, and there was such conflict. And she thought, my goodness me, you know, how can we, you know, try to come together? So she managed to get in a single room, which was quite a feat in itself, a really broad basis of Islamic, Christian, Jewish, secular community members who'd never been in the room together before. She managed to persuade them just by her. You said, John, she's a force of nature. Monica is a force of nature. If Monica gives you an invite, you show up. And so they all did. And they're in the room.
She's 5 feet tall too, by the way.
She's even smaller than me. And that's saying something. That is saying something. And she asked each and every one of them. They sat, first of all, they sat in circle. They didn't sit in serried rows. They sat in a circle, which is what, of course, ancient wisdom, indigenous wisdom teaches us, because when we meet in circle, it's easier for us then to see each other with the eyes of the heart, to hear each other with the ears of the heart. So she got them to sit in circle, and then she asked each of them a question. What do you stand for? And each of them spoke to what they stood for. And she really invited everyone else in the circle just to listen, just to hear. And by that hearing and listening, heart-centered, they started to co-create a field of acceptance, of acknowledgement, of acceptance, of allowance, of safety, of trust, and of belonging. And their conflicts, and it's a process, it's not just a quick switch, but as a process, it started to open up the possibility of how harmony could come. And not harmony, as I was saying earlier, of unity is uniformity, but unity in radical diversity, and how we come to agree to disagree. How do we disagree with civility, with loving openness? So I know that's just a very brief and a start of this process, but there's so much healing that our collective trauma is calling for because of our, buy into this illusion of separation. So it's both going forward in conscious revolution, but we also have a real job on our hands to clear up the trauma from the dis-ease of separation. So it's all the all then, it's a big job. And here we are to link up and lift up to serve it, to serve that potential and possibility.
Thank you, Jude. Janice, any thoughts about harmony through conflict or dealing with conflict? I know there's, at least in my experience when I was a dancer, the dance process, or really any creative process, there's lots of conflict before you arrive at any sort of harmony. It's just sort of part of the what you signed up for. Is there any advice you would give?
Well, I mean, I think this echoes part of what Jude was saying too. I have found that listening and making space for has been really critical, and in many ways, at least in the creative arena that I work in, that just creating a non-resistant and open space in which things can live and be held together, there can oftentimes be a lot of spontaneous kind of course correction that happens just because as living organisms, as John's talked about, I think we do have a writing capacity that can come into play given the right states of nurturance and encouragement and spaciousness. So that's been a lot of what has been at play in my sphere.
Excellent. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot more time, but we do have some. So let's take another question from the audience. Lois Eichelson.
Yes, that's me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm speaking to John. And John, I have spent my whole life working with people who are hungry and homeless and have no respect, et cetera, et cetera. And I see that when I see that your program or your class is sponsored by the very people, the very companies that have caused so much suffering and who have abused our economic system to the utmost, sponsoring what you're teaching, I fear that you are giving them an umbrella, a credence, a credibility, and that they will take your words and pretend to use them, but will not. And it really bothers me a lot.
Well, Lois, let me set you at ease. None of them sponsored us.
You got no money from them at all.
They paid the same money that anyone else did to take the course. We're trying
Then
to.
why are their names on the front of your program?
They're there because they participated in the course, and that slide was used at a an event to try to invite other companies into this way of thing. So, but I assure you, they're each individual from each of those companies paid the same price that anyone else.
Just seeing their names associated with your name and what you're doing, to me, I would have a very hard time attending that. Just like I don't ever go to Walmart. I never go to those places. I don't spend a penny if I can help it. So I'm just letting you know that there are thousands, millions of us out there that when we see those names, all we see is the slave driver.
I hear you.
Okay. I don't want to see their names. It was not going to encourage us to ever participate. But on the other hand, I don't know. I'm afraid they're going to utilize those terms, just like you said, Walmart is pretending.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But let me share one little insight. The woman who organized this conference that I was literally at last week has been asking me to come present to her corporate brands for years. And I've told her, I have no interest in coming and speaking to the sustainability officer for Walmart and for
no kidding.
And she said, John, you're making a mistake. The people in our conference, in our community, are the people inside these companies who are doing the hard, good work, and they're frustrated and they need to hear your message. And that shifted everything for me. And I went, and it was incredible.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. I still do not trust those people to not
understand.
use your words to benefit their bottom line. I'm sorry.
I understand.
It just, all the people I've ever worked with, I'm 71, and after you've seen so much suffering, it's really hard. You know, the people that work at Walmart and then are asked to donate to Walmart employees at Thanksgiving.
I hear you.
So, okay. Thank you.
Truth.
That's all I want is you to
Truth
hear
and-
us.
Thank
Hear
you.
us.
Truth
We're
and
out here.
reconciliation.
Yeah, and you know, that's why I see that there's going to have to be more of a fire or a big bang to make change. I really think I understand our economic system quite well, but I hope that somehow some of these companies, without horrible pressure, will eventually do the right thing. But I don't know. As I said, I look back to the union movement, how many people had to die.
Thank you.
Thank
Liz.
you, John.
Thank you. A big banger, perhaps, as Jude mentioned, a big breath, you know, with the
But
microcosm
fire and
reflecting
air.
the macrocosm. Yes, thank you.
But
Yeah.
think about fire and air together.
Mhm.
Not good.
Yeah. Thank you, Lois.
Uh-huh.
And perhaps following on that, I could pose one final question, and we are a little bit over time, but whatever, to the panelists, just to close. But the question is, what advice would you give for maintaining hope in humanity and the ongoing work of transforming human consciousness, culture, whatever you call it? You know, maintaining that hope is something many people find very difficult, and it seems increasingly difficult, yet it's so essential. So if you could give just one quick word of advice, what would it be?
I'll go first. So I'm going to encourage everyone to get out and dance, to move, to channel the spirit through the body, and do that collectively.
And I would echo that. And I know that some people, I mean, I think I was a temple dancer in another life, Janice. So that's fine, absolutely. And it's, for me, it would widen that invitation to do whatever makes your heart sing. It may be being out and being with a tree. It might be dancing around the kitchen. It might be whatever, doing yoga, but doing whatever feeds you on the inside, whatever nurtures you on the inside. And I would also encourage everyone to link up and lift up together. We're not in this alone.
Yeah.
We literally are in this together, and we're not even in it together just as humanity. We're in it as a planetary sentience. We are Gaians. So as we heal our relationship within ourselves and with each other and link up and lift up, that is where hope is embedded. And I would just finalize by saying, you know, what I spoke of earlier, the evidence for unity in belonging as our existential reality offers us authentic hope. It grounds us, it underpins us, it frames us, it holds us. It's like that anchor that's deeply embedded within the heart of reality. So I just invite everyone to find that healing, remembering, as we're all saying, and coming to that realization and understand that we can do this together.
I think, what shall I say? I think I don't want to be Pollyannish about it. I mean, it's obviously we're in tumultuous times, and it is hard to remain hopeful at times. I'd be the first to admit that. But I honestly am hopeful, and I guess I'm learning to live with this hopeful day-to-day appreciation of all of the glorious beauty of this planet, while at the same time holding the terrifying fear of what might be happening. I think we need to learn. We live at a moment where we need to learn to live with both of those feelings at the same time, and it's our duty to remain hopeful.
Mm. Yeah, perhaps
certainly, if you have kids, that's how you feel, right?
Yeah. I was just going to say, perhaps it's the conflict that produces the harmony or the beauty as well. So we really can't have, the result without a little bit of creative tension on the other hand.
I share a very short story,
Yeah,
if I can.
Yeah.
I traveled with my dad before he died, and he was in the Second World War. In fact, he was in the Navy off the shores of Normandy during the Normandy invasion. And so I traveled with him for 3 days, which I hadn't, in my generation, you don't spend a lot of time with your dad, blah, blah, blah. So it was this real touching moment. And I kept asking him about his life. And I wanted to hear about things that I didn't know about. And he kept coming back to the war, which obviously was a terrifying, horrific experience for him. And yet there was a twinkle in his eye. And what I took from that is that the war, despite all of its horrors, gave his life purpose and meaning. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're gaining our purpose and meaning at this moment, and our kids will, through working through this incredible challenge.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John, and thank you, Jude, and thank you, Janice. Thank you, Chris, of course, as well. Thank you, everybody that's been here today, asked questions, commented in the chat. We see all of your comments. We can't really respond to all of them, but everybody can read them. So thank you for all of that there. It's been a beautiful, beautiful seminar, and thanks to mostly, really entirely to our three excellent speakers. So we are forever grateful and indebted to you guys. Thank you so much. We'll conclude now, as we usually do, with a meditation. And Chris, I believe you're going to lead that.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and get the PowerPoint up, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add my thanks before we do that to the three speakers as well. You've just enriched the vision for us in those fields of cosmology and dance and the arts and economics towards this future culture where the soul will be at its heart. And as we've said before, it was not surprising, but we saw this synchronicity and the common threads emerge of right relationships and wholeness, integration, transformation, belonging, which will inform this new culture. And Jude beautifully defined love as coherent group consciousness. And while Janice pointed out that creativity is what will enable us to address the existential crises of our times and hopefully take us to this better future. So in a sense, this creativity is awakened in a time of crisis, and we can approach all fields of human endeavor, as John's work has reminded us, from the angle of principles, of spiritual laws which are waiting expression. So I wanted to just close quickly with this thought by Alice Bailey, which was written early in the last century. And she noted, this task is, through meditation, to establish the knowledge of and the functioning of those laws and principles which will control the coming era, the new civilization, and the future world culture. So all who serve humanity are linked together subjectively as souls. And she predicted that in the near future, a group of men and women in every country will simultaneously and unanimously meditate upon these basic laws, which are essentially those of a higher kingdom of nature. And they are intended to emerge in the evolutionary and natural processes of planetary unfoldment. These three laws are given to us as the law of right human relations, the law of group endeavor, and the law of spiritual approach. And I think we'll agree that we are not already, are we not already seeing these three laws unfolding in human consciousness, in all the creative efforts that we've discussed today, as well as in the efforts to creatively right wrongs, in the huge growth of groups to serve planetary need, and in the growth of spirituality. So the principle of goodwill is aligned with the law of right human relations. So let's go into our meditation now on goodwill. We link up in thought with all those throughout the world who are working with the goodwill meditation. Reflect upon the fact of relationship. You are related to your family, your community, your nation, the world of nations, the one humanity made up of all races and nations. Let us use the mantra of unification. The souls of all are one, and I am one with them. I seek to love, not hate. I seek to serve and not exact due service. I seek to heal, not hurt. Let pain bring due reward of light and love. Let the soul control the outer form and life and all events, and bring to light the love that underlies the happenings of the time. Let vision come and insight. Let the future stand revealed. Let inner union demonstrate, and outer cleavages be gone. Let love prevail. Let all people love. Reflect upon your own and humanity's relationship with all beings who dwell in the higher realms of mind and heart. The spiritual hierarchy of saints, rishis, bodhisattvas, and masters, honored by all the world's religions and spiritual groups. Imagine that you are standing together within the center of the spiritual hierarchy, immersed in the consciousness of the heart of love. For some, this heart is known as the Christ, and other faiths have other names for the one at the center, such as Maitreya, the Imam Mahdi, and the Kalki avatar. Maintaining that high point of contact, let your thoughts reach out to include all members of the human family in whom the energy of goodwill is active. Voice the affirmation. In the center of all love, I stand. From that center, I, the soul, will outward move. From that center, I, the one who serves, will work. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group, and throughout the world. Visualize the energy of love flowing from the spiritual hierarchy through men and women of goodwill into human hearts and minds, infusing them with goodwill and creating loving and harmonious human relationships. Meditate on ways of spreading goodwill, creating right human relationships, and restoring peace on earth. Realize that you are helping to build a channel between the spiritual hierarchy and humanity, through which the energy of goodwill may flow, uniting the human family, solving its problems, and healing all differences and cleavages. Linked in thought with men and women of goodwill all over the world, will say the great invocation, the adapted version. Say it with deliberation and full commitment to its meaning, knowing that you are radiating its potent energies to humanity. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into human minds. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into human hearts. May the coming one return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide all little human wills, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center, which we call the human race, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Thank you. I just neglected to thank all of you, all our participants today, for joining us and adding the richness of their consciousness to the reflections and meditations today. So I'll hand you over to Michael now.
Thank you, Chris. Just a few final announcements about some of our upcoming meetings. We have tomorrow the Triangles Meditation Group webinar, as it does meet every Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. However, tomorrow, because the UK and Europe do go into daylight savings, excuse me, it's not tomorrow, it's Monday. The Triangles Meditation Group webinar will be held Monday, October 31st, 3 p.m., 4 p.m. EDT as normal. But in the UK and Europe, it will be 1 hour earlier at 7 p.m. GMT and 8 p.m. Central Eastern Time due to daylight savings. The following week, it will return to its normal time for everybody. Festival of Scorpio meeting, full moon meditation meeting will be Monday, November 7th at 6 p.m. And the next World Goodwill webinar will be Wednesday, November 30th, last Wednesday of the month, at its normal time of noon Eastern, 5 GMT. Thank you all again, and have a blessed, blessed day.